Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 13. Unless, of course, you are checking this out early and you're probably still in week number 12. I'll cover my bases by saying I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, or I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. So, this week we're going to be doing a critique of a epidemiologic research study. And as future academics, or as current academics even, because we have a mix of you in class, you're going to be asked to critique research studies and to suggest if a paper is suitable for publication. So we're going to practice that this week. Is there a standard approach? And that's a good question. I don't think there is. I'm not familiar with a standard approach or checklist. I have had the opportunity to do reviews for probably close to 30 journals. That's just a guesstimation, but there's a good variety. And not once has the journal asked me to follow a certain checklist or set of guidelines. So, who are reviewers? Well, those are you and me. We are the volunteers in the academia world or academic world, and we do reviews to give back to our profession or to our discipline, and also to vet the quality of research that is being disseminated. Now, in my opinion, a reviewer should look for grammar, punctuation, and spelling issues, and that's important because it helps the authors and it highlights things to them. One, if they've made some errors, and two, that how they have written things may not make sense or that there could be a better way to write something. Also, English is not the first language for many researchers, and we serve as kind of a front door, or is that the right way of saying it? We serve as kind of a check on things that, as a journal editor sends you something to review, if you look at it and you can't understand it, then you can appreciate that the general audience is not going to understand it. Also, as a reviewer, I think you should be critiquing the methodology in the statistical analysis section. You should help identify missing literature from the intro and discussion sections and critique the threats to validity. Now, in my opinion, a reviewer should not do these things, but we are often asked to weigh in on these things. That is, how impactful the article will be. So, if you're not familiar with it already, there is a way that journals are ranked. It's called the impact factor. And basically, it is a score that a journal gets based upon the number of times that articles published in that journal over a certain time period have been cited. Obviously, journal editors want to have their journal be a premier one for people who want to put really influential or potentially influential research in. And so if something has a higher impact factor, people are going to want to submit there. I don't know that it should be our job, but we are sometimes asked to tell the editor what we think the impact of the article will be. And that's basically like, is the article in the top 10%, 25%, or 50% of all submissions? Well, again, how would we know what all the submissions are? It is basically your professional opinion, your guesstimation. Is it fair? I don't think it's necessarily fair. I think it'd be better if an article was reviewed and if it had, good methodology to it, if it had interesting findings, if there wasn't threats to validity, then it should be considered for publication. But journals get tons of good papers, and they've got to somehow figure out a way to weed things out. Now, is that a way of saying that the research you do in the future might not find a home? No, that's not saying that at all. There are numerous journals out there. For example, just in the world of sports medicine, there's somewhere between 70 to 80 different journals. And so there are numerous ways to get something published. And from my own professional experience, there has not been one paper that I have submitted that has not found a home. Maybe it wasn't in the first home I tried to get it into, or the first journal I tried to submit to, but it eventually found a home 2 or 3 times later. Another thing that you might be asked to do is make recommendations to reject for any reason other than being poorly written or threats to validity of the paper. And again, that kind of ties in with, is it good enough for our journal? And so, again, that's making you take on a role of being like an associate editor. So I don't agree that we should be doing those things, but the reality is you'll be asked to do these things all the time. Now, how do you become a reviewer, or how do you get asked to do reviews? Well, once you submit a paper to a journal, they have your contact info, and now you basically become a reviewer. Or you could always contact your favorite journal and sign up to become a reviewer. You will receive emails asking you to do reviews, either to accept or to reject. My recommendation is give careful consideration to whether or not to review some open access journals. Some are legit. Some just want papers published, in my opinion, to get the article processing charges, which can be pretty expensive at times. Some of those journals, they're considered predatory. They're basically published with us, pay a lot of money, and there isn't the same kind of quality control standards. So this next section here, these next series of slides present questions to guide the review of a research article. I said before, there really isn't a standard or accepted or universal way to go about things. But what I want you to do is to read through these different questions that can guide your evaluation of a paper. So for example, in the section where they present the problem statement and the purpose, well, what was the problem and the purpose of the research study? Does the problem or purpose statement express a relationship between 2 or more variables? Are they testable? Does the problem statement and or purpose specify the nature of the population being studied? What significance of the problem, if any, has the investigator identified? So for these next few slides, what I'm going to do is give some kind of dead air. And so I'll say, pause the recording now. And that's your cue to pause the recording. Basically, what I'm going to do is give about 5 or 6 seconds of dead air. So when you pause the recording and you start it back up, it'll be quiet for a moment, but then it will move forward. During the time that you pause the recording, read through the questions, just start to get a feel or flavor for things. And then we'll kind of move on from there. So go ahead and pause the recording now. And now reading on hypotheses or research questions, go ahead and pause the recording now. Hopefully you read that previous section. Go ahead and pause the recording now. And go ahead and pause the recording now. Read through this section. And pause the recording now. And again, you see here it talks about nursing practice, so that's kind of gives you an idea about where this came from. Okay, so you've had a chance to kind of read through these. Basically, what I like to think about is in the introduction section, those first 3 to 4 paragraphs, did the authors make a case for why their study was necessary? Did they provide background information as to why the study is needed? and or what has been done before or what is known about the problem. Did they have a paragraph which they identify the purpose of the study and the hypothesis or hypotheses they're going to be looking at? Oh, continuing on, did they describe the method section? Did it make sense? Did it make sense to the point where you feel like you could have carried it out? Now, of course, if you don't have expertise in motion capture lab, biomechanics, things like that, maybe you wouldn't be able to understand it. But in general, do you feel like it covered all the bases? Did they talk about their sample? Did they talk about the recruitment process? Did they note that the study was approved by an IRB, etc., etc.? In the statistical analysis section, did they discuss everything that you felt like should have been covered from the statistical analysis? In the results, were the results presented clearly? Did they talk about each table or the data in each table in the paper? Was anything in the results not discussed or linked back to the statistical analysis section, or was there anything in the statistical analysis section that wasn't linked with the results? What I mean by that is maybe they talk about an analysis that they presented in the results, but they didn't talk about that they would be doing that in the statistical analysis section. And then finally, in the discussion, did they discuss their findings, not repeat their results, but discuss the findings and what they mean, and did they compare them to previously known research? Did they compare and contrast their findings versus others? Did they highlight the strengths of their study? Did they highlight the limitations? And finally, in the conclusion section, did they provide basically the clinical significance or how their research should be viewed, and did they sum it up along those lines? So you're going to be critiquing now something. You're going to turn in a Word document answering these 7 questions. You're going to find this critique assignment on or in Canvas. Identify a minimum of 5 grammar, punctuation, or spelling errors. So what you'll do is say like line 39, change there to there. Number 2, in the introduction section, did the authors present the description of the problem? Was there use of the literature to form a sound and logical rationale? Is there anything missing from the introduction that you would like to have seen in there? Discuss in a few sentences to a paragraph the appropriateness of the research design. If you feel that it is not appropriate, then suggest an alternate design. Review the methodology. Are there any aspects that the authors either failed to include or did not develop enough to allow the reader the ability to reproduce a study? Are the results presented in a logical and chronological order? Did they include call-outs for tables and figures? Are the tables easy to follow? If not, how would you suggest that they be formatted? And then discuss in a few sentences to a paragraph the discussion section. Did the authors review the major findings? Did they compare their study with prior studies? Did they discuss the limitations of their study? So, see the instructions document. There are 3 different papers to choose from. Just select one for your review. And again, my apologies, I do not have papers that reflect the diversity of the professions within this class. So if you are looking at something that feels like it's outside of your area, well, 1, that's a good challenge. 2, sometimes that'll come about where you'll be asked to do something and you might serve a very valuable role as a pair of eyes that maybe don't know the material, but you're able to provide kind of a good critique because, again, if you're not understanding it, the general audience probably doesn't understand it.